Tonight on the All Kinds of Weather Forecast, we recap the debacle in the swamp. The Florida Gators go down 33-20 at home against the Texas A&M Aggies. We recap the game and we talk about it's not about if, but when Billy Napier is no longer the head coach at Florida. This is the All Kinds of Weather Forecast. And welcome in to another episode of the All Kinds of Weather Forecast. I am your host, Chris Yanes, alongside my co-host, Neil Schulman, here in the heart of Gator Nation, a Gator Nation reeling, a Gator Nation in search already of its next head coach, just waiting for that final shoe to drop when we hear about when Billy Napier will no longer be the head coach. And with that, there'll be a lot of news coming in the coming weeks, coming months. So you want to make sure that you're subscribed down below. Hit that subscribe button if you are not already. Hit a like button on this show and leave a comment, your reaction to the debacle in the swamp against the Texas A&M Aggies and where the Gators program goes from here. And of course, we also want to shout out our sponsor, 401k Generation, the wealth management company that helps you invest today for your future tomorrow. Their team of advisors is committed to providing guidance and education for your 401k plan and its participants. And they also offer a range of enrollment solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your company's 401k plan. Whether it's saving for your child's college, investment advice, or even your retirement, 401k Generation's team of advisors makes getting to know you their top priority. Their advisors will tailor a path to assist you in navigating life's financial milestones and reaching your financial goals. 401k Generation, building stronger futures, one generation at a time. For more information, contact them at 866-998-5879 or visit their website at 401kgeneration.com. Shout out Eddie Rojas. Shout out 401k Generation. It's about the only thing we can shout out on this show these days. So, Neil, we had a game in the swamp. The SEC opener took place. We had the pleasure of watching the game again together. It was a
Was it a
mess.
pleasure? Was it really a pleasure?
Well, it's always a pleasure watching with you, of course.
Of
And,
course.
I
Yes.
want to take also the opportunity to shout out some of the fans that have been sitting near us the last two games. We got Jonathan behind us. Jonathan is a season ticket holder who sits behind Neil and I at the games. He recognized us. And Jonathan, we just want to shout you out. You are definitely one of the more passionate fans we have at the game. So looking forward to continuing to watch more Gator football with you this season, hopefully in the future. And I think we had Andy last week against Samford. I want to give him a shout out. He and his family were there at the game. Said he's on the audio listening side. So make sure if you're listening on the audio format, like Andy, leave us a 5-star review and rate and review us. Helps bring Gator Nation more great content. So just want to shout some fans out throughout the game and the folks that come up to us on Gainesville. It definitely, obviously we're not very excited about the product and having to talk about it on this show, but we really do appreciate fan feedback when we get it. And when people stop us in Gainesville and say hi and just say, hey, we recognize you, recognize the show, love what you do. It really does. It feels good. Neil and I love doing this and to hear from our fans and get that feedback in person is great. So we want to make sure we shout out people like Jonathan and Andy.
Second
All
that
right.
message, by the way. It's not just coming from Chris, it's coming from two different people. So thank you. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Neil. So let's get into some of the ugly stuff, though. We got to talk about. We got to recap this game, and I think tonight we're gonna quickly recap this game. I really don't want to talk a lot about it. I think everybody saw what show it was on Saturday. I think most fans are really more interested in the future of Billy Napier, what is about to ensue in the program, and then where we go from here. So opening drive, Texas A&M, and Neil, the crowd was really into it at the start of the game. I mean, an announced crowd of nearly 90,000 fans. It was just shy of that for I think about 7 fans short of the 90,000 capacity crowd. And it was loud at the beginning of the game. Florida was able to force some early penalties against Texas A&M. It looked like we had them backed up in their own territory, and then all of that was, blown away when we let Marcel Reed get around the corner and just bust a huge run. And then from there, it was just off to the races for A&M. They capped off that drive with a field goal, but then would later on in the quarter make it 10-0. Florida would be shut out in the first half, 20-0. They just could not get anything going. Billy Napier ended up splitting the baby and literally rotated quarterback possession by possession. No matter what happened, if one quarterback seemingly was a little more hot than the other, he still went from Graham Mertz to DJ Lagway and vice versa the entire game. In fact, after the game, they actually asked him about the rotation, and they said that was the plan all along, was to rotate quarterbacks regardless of the outcome on the field, which quite frankly is crazy to think you wouldn't do that. And late in the game, when Florida actually made it a two-score game again, 33-20, Florida opted to, and look, we clamored for DJ Lagway to get the start, but Graham Mertz did lead a touchdown drive late in the game with 5 minutes to go. And Florida had an opportunity to get the ball back with about 3.5 minutes to go and make it a one-score game. And he opted to go with the quarterback that didn't just lead the drive down the field. 78-yard drive, in fact. So it was a little bit frustrating that we ended up going that route and not just riding the hot hand or riding one quarterback all the time. We said it on the show. If you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. And I think that really was the case in this game if you really get down to the nuts and bolts of it. This game, of course, was on a lightning delay for about 30 to 45 minutes. And the rain did ensue. It wasn't monsoon conditions out there, but it was a pretty heavy and steady rain. Didn't really have an effect on the play, though. There wasn't really, the ball wasn't slipping out of guys' hands. We didn't see any fumbles or anything like that. It was business as usual. Texas A&M out of the drive went 99 yards, 99 yards to score a touchdown. It really was incredible, Neil. It just the game did not go Florida's way whatsoever. Some of the offensive notes in this game: Chimere Dike, Wisconsin transfer. We've talked a lot about him on the show for his punt return ability. Has shown now in the offensive game plan that he's showing up, replacing Eugene Wilson in this game, who was unable to go. 6 catches, 91 yards, and getting his first touchdown as a Gator. Elijah Badger also once again having a fantastic game, brought in his first touchdown of his career at Florida. And, Graham Mertz honestly played pretty well. 12 of 15, 995 yards, 80% completion rate, a touchdown. He did have an interception. He did have some overthrows. He missed some throws in this game too. If you look at DJ Lagway's performance, not as good. DJ did not. He struggled a little bit at times in this game. It wasn't the performance we saw against Stanford. We did mention that this was going to be an up in talent to play against, but it was still an opportunity to showcase his skills. 6 of 13, 54 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions in this game. Running was terrible. Only 52 on 25 carries. Treyon Webb actually was the leading ball carrier in this one with 6 carries for 37 yards. Jacoby Jackson, the JUCO transfer, added one late in the game to make it 33-20. But Neil, this was a disaster. This was a disaster. There was a point in the first half where Florida had negative yardage. There was a point right before halftime. Florida had negative rushing yardage. It was an abject disaster. And honestly, I would say maybe even more embarrassing than the Miami game 2 weeks ago. And the score does not indicate how poorly Florida was dominated in this game. They were down 33-7 at one point. The final score was 33-20. All right. Go ahead, bring in here, Neil. What are your thoughts? What is your reaction to the debacle in the swamp?
Here we go. All
Don't try not to
right.
go too nuclear.
So yeah, that's a hard ask. Look, like I said in the pre-show, come 3:30 p.m. Saturday afternoon or 3:50 p.m. whenever we kicked off because LSU South Carolina went later than it was expected to. Whatever, come kickoff time, we're going to learn a lot about Billy Napier's plans for his personal future here. Does he want to coach the Gators? Does he want $25.6 million to not coach the Gators? Well, we learned. We got our answer. Napier doesn't want to be here anymore. The action that he took at quarterback told us everything. The actions he took at quarterback, or the non-actions of the failure to take it seriously, told us everything we wanted to be. Starting Mertz, rotating Lagway in as a supporting cast member here and there, and then just rotating them back and forth. And again, this is nothing against Graham Mertz. He's done everything in a first-class manner. He's repped the school very well. Actually met him and interacted with him a little bit last year to set up a surprise for Tyson Wills, the Gator Good Foundation recipient. Couldn't have been nicer. Great dude. not the best quarterback we have on the roster. And thus, all that is old is new again. Muschamp should have played Brissett over Driscoll. McElwain should have never run off Will Greer. Mullen should have played Kyle Trask over Felipe Franks. Luckily, he got bailed out of that decision in 2019, but he didn't learn his lesson. Should have played Richardson over Emory Jones in 2021. Here we go again. Another bad decision at the quarterback position. What else are we supposed to make of this? He's just following in the footsteps of the three Gator coaches before him. And honestly, I'm just so sick and tired of breaking down all the stupidity that these coaches are responsible for. It really it hurts my head to think about some of the things that they do. I mean, I've been there, I've done that. Talked about the special teams issues as far back as South Carolina and Vanderbilt in 2022. Of course, it didn't get better. The replicate jersey against Utah. You got the substitution issue against Arkansas. Of course, it didn't get fixed. We talked about the play calling issues against Kentucky in both 2022 and 2023, and against FSU in both 2022 and 2023. First, with Richardson throwing 6 straight incomplete passes for 2 straight 3-and-outs to start the second half in 2022. And then probably the single stupidest trick play I've ever seen in 2023. The lack of urgency against Kentucky in 2023, nothing's changed. The play calling is still brainless. In fact, things seem to have gotten worse in a sense. Just one of the many X's and O's problems. And I do mean the many X's and O's problems we saw, but just one of them. On one play in the third quarter, the game's already way out of hand. It's 26-7, and you have Hayden Hansen, who's a tight end, and Taylor Spirito, a walk-on wide receiver, lined up wide. And this is no disrespect to either one of them. They're Florida Gators. They get up super early for stadium steps and lifts, just like the rest of their teammates. So, I realize that's not an easy life. It's very physically uncomfortable to push your body to those limits. They have my respect. They're giving it their all. But anyway, you have a tight end and a walk-on wide receiver lined up wide on the far side of the field. And meanwhile, the 2 blue chip wide receivers that you just recruited, Tank Hawkins and Aiden Mizell, both of whom, by the way, caught a touchdown pass a week ago, are nowhere to be found. They're not on the short side of the field. They're not in motion. They're not even catching their breath on the sideline for a short rest because they got so much work on the previous few plays. No, they're just casually chilling on the sidelines in the middle of a game where you're down by 3 touchdowns, a game that, according to Chris and some other people, he knew the importance of this game. Yeah, sure he did. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. He does, after all, have 25.6 million reasons not to care. But point being, this is not a charity organization. This isn't rec league where everyone has to play because mommy and daddy signed them up. This is SEC football where you play your best players and you do what has to be done to win. And of course he didn't do it because that's who he is. We've talked about it before. The guy is just a loser. That's what he is. His record says that. And that's not even throwing Chris under the bus. The only mistake you made, Chris, the only mistake you made was thinking that the coach at the University of Florida would understand that he needs to have the most microscopic dust particle worth of urgency with a 7-15 record against Power 5 teams coming into the game.
Let me just jump in really quick on that. So you're right. And I did say, if you remember, if the score was 2 scores or more at halftime, he would make the change and go for it. What happened? We were down 20-0 at halftime, and he didn't. He continued to go along with this 2 quarterback system rotation. He played guys that were, evaluation wise, like you said, no disrespect to those people. I mean, Hayden Hansen is a tight end. He shouldn't be split out wide. Like it's not that he shouldn't be on the field. It's that he shouldn't be in that position. And having a walk-on receiver playing over 2 blue chip wide receivers. I think one was a top 100. In fact, you cannot tell me that individual is more talented than those 2 individuals. It just defies logic. And, at this point, I'm no longer going to, any ounce of trust that I had left for Napier, or the thought that I thought that he would understand the urgency, clearly doesn't anymore, or he doesn't care. I think at this point, he understands the writing's on the wall. He is cooked, as the memes say. He's not going to be the head coach much longer. So I don't know if he coaches this game on Saturday. At the time of this recording, he is still the head coach. We'll get into some of the things we're hearing behind the scenes right now and maybe the timeline for this. But Yeah, Neil. I mean, look, I'm if I ever come on this show again and say I think Bailey Napier understands the urgency or he is going to do the right thing, please reach across the screen and slap me because I'm
It's not,
done. I'm done. I don't know why. I don't even know why I gave him any grace with this, but he completely, just fumbled away the situation for
but it's
lack of a
not even
better
just
term.
you. You weren't the only one. I think that that was an outlier opinion, but it wasn't 0% of the fan base that thought that. There were legitimately people who were in our comments saying, no, this time he gets it. Miami woke him up. Now he understands it. There are people
No,
saying this.
do you understand like from a human aspect of this, like why we would think that though? Because
Yes,
like
I
if
do.
I
For
if
a normal human being to coach the Florida Gators program, for just an adequate coach, yeah, I'd understand it. But Billy Napier's not an adequate coach. He's so far below that threshold that he cannot even see it looking up through the clouds with a microscope or a telescope. I'm so pissed I can't even get my scopes right. Just, dude, think about what you're saying. Think about what you're saying. You're asking for me to have the slightest bit of trust in a coach who came into this game having won less than a third of the games he had ever coached against Power Five opponents. And along the way, it wasn't that the refs just screwed the Gators over every single time, or opponents were just Odell Beckham Jr.ing these catches with three fingers. They were just getting flat out beaten up, beaten down, beaten on the recruiting trail, beaten in the trenches, beaten with the balls in the air, beaten when Manny Nunnery doesn't drop back in coverage on 4th and 17, beaten for a school record 702 yards of total offense. They're just getting beat left and right. Why am I supposed to believe that things are going to change after seeing 15 losses against only 7 wins against P5 teams?
Yep. Well, we're not going to be, you won't hear anybody on this show believing anything anymore from this guy. We're done. It's curtains. It's time to move on. It's time to turn the page on this. And, it's just an embarrassing performance because, I think it's sad that he doesn't understand he, along with people in our administration, don't understand what the standard is at the University of Florida. And, today when the top 25 came out, I found myself and I looked at those logos, and obviously we weren't on there. I used to, I thought back, like there was a time period, Neil, where like I
You
would be
used to look at
distraught
that.
if we weren't even a top 10 team. I mean, that is the standard at the University of Florida is when you need to be a top 10 team, a top 10 football program. We're competing for that on an annual basis. And right now we're not even close. And I think the head coach clearly doesn't have the urgency to get there. And I don't believe we have an administration in place right now that actually believes that that is our standard. And we are not going to allow them, and nobody listening to this should allow them to degrade the standard that is the University of Florida and our history and our tradition. It can be done here again. It can be done here again. We should not be losing 2 out of 3 home games to open the season, both against P5 opponents. We haven't beat a P5 opponent in the swamp since October 7th of last year or October 8th. I mean, it's
And that's
ridiculous.
Vanderbilt, by the way. Does that really
Van,
count?
it,
Although they beat
yeah,
us the last time we played them, so maybe they should. For
yeah.
Napier,
I
that's a
mean,
big game.
it's just astounding. And now Napier has lost more games in the swamp in less than 3 seasons that Spurrier lost in 12 years. Spurrier lost 5 games in the swamp. I mean, it's just
Napier
nobody
has
feel.
lost four in the last 4 games he has coached against Power Five opponents.
Yeah,
That's one less than Steve Spurrier lost in a dozen seasons.
people come to the swamp now for a vacation. It's like
Yeah.
it's like let's go have some fun. I don't know where I read it, but somebody was talking about how like they were at the game and apparently there were a bunch of A&M guys there that were on a bachelor party. I mean,
Yeah.
we're a destination game now for you to go get a win and have fun in a SEC school in a college town. Because Gainesville's a great place. You're gonna have a good time when you go there. Obviously, it's an iconic college football venue, has a lot of history there when they were good. And now people just go there to have fun, and yeah, we're gonna get a win too while we're at it.
That
So
was Texas A&M's first road win since 2021, by the way.
yeah,
3 years, their first road win.
and and I think, and this is the other thing, and we can get into I think Napier after this. No, I don't really think the fans need to hear any more analysis of this game necessarily until our verdict. But Billy Napier is in the third year of his tenure. And once again, I'm going to say it. He told us that the roster was stocked with the talent that he was looking for. He told us this was the most competitive depth he had ever seen. He told us the culture was fixed. He told us that the schedule, we didn't need to worry about it, that people were overblowing it, and that the Gators were motivated and ready to take it on. And in comes a first-year head coach in his third game of his tenure, in his first SEC game on the road, no less, and comes in and absolutely blows the doors off of you. It was 33-7 with a minute four left in the third quarter. Florida scored two touchdowns late in the game to make it look respectable. That score does not indicate how much Florida was really blown out in this game.
And by the way,
Yeah,
that comes 2 weeks after a guy who was hired within 8 days of you, Billy Napier, also coming into your home and blowing the doors off of you as well.
yep.
Which, but that's the other thing too. Well, maybe we'll get into that later. But this is getting worse. Florida, like the Florida program is getting worse as we go along with the Napier tenure. But I mean,
It
we
is getting
we
worse.
can we can table that for maybe later in the show, or maybe as a bit
Well,
of a postmortem. But
let's talk about it now. I mean, look, we're here now. It is
yeah,
September 15th. Billy Napier is still employed. Sources close to the program are indicating that the buyout money has been secured through the high-end donors of our program. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the hammer drops.
yep.
Uh, Neil and I were talking before we came on the show. Neil is saying that basically that there's some negotiating behind the scenes right now. Obviously, Jimmy Sexton's going to be involved in this for Napier on Napier's end. I mean, look, and from what we're also hearing is that Scott Strickland is not necessarily as involved or calling the shots with this. This is more so the high-end boosters, the board of trustees, the people, the brass outside of the athletic department are essentially calling the shots because right now we don't have a university president that is going to be permanent. We have an interim president right now, and we have an athletic director who is quickly losing his grasp on the situation, and rightfully so, because he shouldn't have a say in the next hire. He's pretty much going along with what everybody is telling him to do at this point. After 2 weeks ago, he told Paul Feinbaum that Billy Napier was going to be the head coach here for a very long time. If Mr. Strickland believed that 2 weeks ago, then he fooled and deceived every single person in this fan base, and he is not equipped to make the next hire, and he should no longer be running our athletic department.
So yeah,
Period.
that's a different Strickland.
Well,
Strickland is his own separate type of nightmare, but suffice to say, neither he nor Billy Napier belongs to the University of Florida. But this show is more about Napier. We will go into Scott Strickland, and we will go into the powers that be above him. Maury Hosseini, we're looking at you. But for right now, let's just stick with Billy Napier. And what I was kind of leading into a moment ago was, as we get into talks about the future of this program, there's another point that we have to talk about. It is dangerous to think that this Florida Gator football program has just naturally plateaued. And I don't even mean in the, well, just a new normal. Guess we're an academic school now. We'll be another, or we'll be a public Ivy and we'll never compete again in football. Let's just be Virginia kind of way. No, that's bad enough. But I mean that Napier's program reaches a new low every time it steps on the field. It is getting worse than it was in his first year and his second year. Because at least in Napier's first 2 years, Florida was winning some games on its home field. Not only are they not winning anymore on their home field, like we said, Gators have lost 4 straight games to Power 5 opponents on their home field. Not only are they not winning games, Florida's getting straight up blown away in its own building. 41-17 to Miami, 33-20 to A&M, which, as you said, was a game that was nowhere near as close as that final score indicates. 4 consecutive losses at home to FBS teams. But by the way, as we said earlier, twice as many losses as Urban Meyer had in his first 5 seasons at Florida, and is one short of the number of losses in the swamp that Steve Spurrier suffered in 12 seasons. And now they're not even competitive. 3 of those 4 losses, those last 4, have been by 2 scores, and the other one was to a 2-6 team that had an interim offensive coordinator, former wide receivers coach, 30-year-old Kenny Guyton, calling the plays for the first time in his life. And they come in the swamp and win for the first time ever. So, no, this program is not in just as bad of a state as when Dan Mullen left. It is quantifiably worse. right now than it was in the prior two seasons. Forget 2021. It is in a worse spot now than it was a year ago. Now that Napier has cleaned up the culture, as he said, now that Napier has the best roster he's ever had, now that all those platitudes that he's been spewing for the past 9 months, this past offseason, which, by the way, was a month longer than it should have been because the Gators did not make a bowl game last year. Thank you, Billy, for that, too. But when you're 12 and 16, it just, the analysis stops mattering. It stops becoming relevant. Who did what, when, to lose which game? The pattern of losing has been developed. Like I said, there is more blame to go around here. Players have to execute. The strength and conditioning coaches clearly did not do as good of a job as we thought they did, which also falls on Napier because who brought them here? Who hired these assistant coaches? Who recruited these players? When you're 12 and 16, it does not matter what happens when. The pattern of losing is developed and it is entrenched in this program. Like I said weeks ago, Napier is simply a loser. You are what your record says you are. Napier is 12 and 16. He is 9 and 16 against FBS teams. He is 7 and 16 against the Power 5 teams. And guess what else? The University of Florida is not, or at least should not be, employing losers to the tune of north of $7 million a year. So, yes, fire Billy Napier and let's clean house while we're at it. Scott Strickland's got to go. Maury Hosseini, the chairman of the board of trustees, I hope you're watching this show or these sound bites get to you because the target is about to shift upward once more. We talked about how in the Mike White tenure, when he was coaching the Gator basketball program, it's no longer a Mike White problem if the Gator basketball team keeps losing. It's a Scott Strickland problem because Scott Strickland has the power to fire him and refuses to do so at every available turn. Well, the same thing is going to be applied to Billy Napier here, or has been applied to Billy Napier. It's a Scott Strickland problem because Strickland does not fire him. And to date, as of this recording, has not fired him. And now that target goes from Napier to Strickland, from Strickland up to Maury Hosseini, the chairman of the board. You can't just sit here and do nothing, dude. If you enjoy actively watching your fellow Minecraft enthusiasts just sit back and not do a damn thing, this is on you too. So I'm done with the PC politeness. It is time for scorched effing earth. And this problem is way higher than Billy and Strickland.
Yeah, it goes beyond it. There has to be a reckoning with the University Athletic Association. There has been people, an old guard, an establishment that has been there for far too long. It's an antiquated approach to the way they run college athletics now. They're always behind the eight ball. You go back almost 2 decades now. We were behind the facilities race. It took us until the year of our Lord 2022 to have a standalone football facility, which should have happened 20 years prior. NIL was signed into law on July 1st, 2021. We had no plan and we were ill-equipped to take that on. And we are still behind as the NIL game speeds up. Then the transfer portal comes. Then all of the other things with recruiting come. We are still behind the eight ball. And it is not just a head coaching problem. It is an athletic department at the top brass. Let me be very clear. The top brass, the people that run the office, they are the problem here. We need to have people that come to Florida and understand what its fans want. We've been to 3 consecutive home games now, Neil. Sellouts for 2 out of 3. The fans are some of the most loyal and some of the most dedicated out there. They stood in a literal rainstorm and watched a beatdown of their own team. I went home last night drenched. Wasn't able to get dry clothes on until almost midnight last night. We are dedicated fans because we love our school. We love our logo. We have a lot of pride in that. And we need administrators that understand that. And right now, we don't have administrators who have the same heart and the same passion that we have for our program. And until that is equal and until that it changes, we will continue to fail. You could hire Lane Kiffin tomorrow, and you're still going to have half the problems that we have now. They may be masked over by the fact that you have a better in-game coach who can scheme up better offenses and maybe hire better defensive staff that's going to at least stop a nosebleed every now and then on third down. But until you change the top brass, the Florida Gators will go nowhere. And look, I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna go a step further, and I think this is probably a deep dive for another show. But if you look at the hires that Scott Strickland made versus the hires that Jeremy Foley made that are still at the University of Florida, it is night and day. 18 national championships have been won since Scott Strickland arrived at the University of Florida. None of them were hired at his hands. Zero. He has a total of 8 conference titles. All of them were done by Anthony Nesty, who he promoted after Greg Troy retired from the swim program. And that's also mixed between men and women's because he coaches both men and women's teams. So you're kind of double dipping actually on an annual basis there. So that's a little bit of an inflated statistic actually in the conference titles. But Anthony Nesty was hired by the University of Florida by Greg Troy before Scott Strickland ever stepped foot on campus. He was an assistant under Greg Troy for a long time and then was promoted to the head coaching role. Anybody and their mother knows that was the right move to make at the time. He was pretty much a head coach in waiting if there ever was one in the swim world. So I'm sorry, 12 now. I read the stat wrong. 12 national championships, 31 conference titles, 11 conference tourney titles won since Strickland has been here in 2016. All of those were hired by Jeremy Foley.
Let's
So,
also not forget the fact that Scott Strickland hired not one, but two coaches who ended up having to be fired because of abuse of their athletes.
yep. And this we're bringing this up because I think, and from what we hear, there seems to be sort of this disconnect right now with the powers that be, that they don't see this as they see Billy Napier as the problem, but not as a symptom. It's kind of like if I had cancer and you were attacking you think Billy Napier is the actual cancer. No, the cancer is the people running our athletic department. The symptom is the fact that they continue to hire failed football coaches. Billy Napier, Dan Mullen, a guy that didn't like to recruit, Jim McElwain, down the line. It's been going on for some time now, and we got to put an end to it. We've got to bring people in here, Neil, that care about the University of Florida and want to win. They want to win. And right now, our rivals are running circles around us because they have leadership that understands how to win and they have a will to win. So I don't know where we go from here, but we'll have an announcement, I think, in the next week or so here. I think so there were some rumors out there that it could have actually come today. It may come this week. If it doesn't come by tomorrow, I think Billy Napier will coach Mississippi State, but I could see a turn at the bye week, regardless of the outcome next week. I think the mind is made up. Billy Napier will not be the head coach for much longer here at the University of Florida. A bye week could be the time to make the move because you would allow an interim to get set in place for the remainder of the season. Because obviously you'd only be 4 games into the year. You still have 8 games to go, and really the teeth of the schedule still to go. So a lot has to be worked out behind the scenes. Of course, this stuff can't just be happen overnight, but things have been moving for weeks now. After the Miami game was the inflection point, it turned. And now we're starting to see movement really happen where we could have a decision and an announcement made at any time.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like it's a matter of when, not if. I think that's pretty clear. There's not really anything that he can do to save himself. Chris, I think at this point we're kind of shifting to the juncture where we just start talking about the past tense, how he's going to be remembered at Florida, what his legacy is going to be, because it doesn't seem like there's anything that's going to change the fact that he was a failure.
Yeah, no, he is going to go down as the worst coach since the 1930s. You had talked about that time period and how his record stacked up against him. He'll literally be the worst coach since the 1930s. He will actually have coached fewer games, most likely, if he is fired in the next week or so, than Jim McElwain did, even in his third season. Jim McElwain made it to the Georgia game in 2017 before he was relieved of his duties, and Randy Shannon coached the remainder of that season. So it is a matter of if or a win, not if. And his legacy at Florida is that of a loser. He's going to have the first losing record of a head coach since the 1940s. And it's a shame that we're at this point. It's unfathomable that we could have a program as proud as ours with a rich history in the recent decades that we would have hire a coach that would then have a losing record. I don't think anybody could ever imagine that. I mean, if you go back in the history of Florida football, the amount of head football coaches we haven't had one with a losing record since World War II. I mean, that is insane to me. Insane. And, we're going to look back upon this time and wish that we could have a guy like Ron Zook back. I mean, you know, it pales in comparison. Remember when I thought that was the low point. It's not even close to the low point. I mean, Jim McElwain was 22-12 when he was fired. Dan Mullen was 34-15. Will Muschamp 28-21. Ron Zook was 23-14. Billy Napier is 12-16. And he is going to finish with a losing record in his tenure at Florida. That is his legacy.
He's the worst coach in Florida Gator history. I'm just going to go out on a limb and state that. I'm not even going to bother by saying he's one of the worst or the worst since World War II. No.
And
Billy
just for
Napier,
reference, so Josh Cody was 17-24. So pretty darn close. And
no,
then
but
Tom Lee was 20-26.
All
So
right.
that's pretty close.
The hell with that. The hell with the records. Listen, Billy Napier is the worst coach in the history of Florida Gator football. Bar none, no hyperbole, no exaggeration, no cap. He is verifiably the single worst coach in the history of Florida Gator football. And look, I promised facts on this earlier in the week, so here we go. Here are the 5 worst coaches in the history of Gator football from strictly a winning percentage standpoint. Raymond Wolf with 35.9%, 1946 to 1949. Number 2 is Josh Cody, 41.9% from 1936 to 39. Billy Napier, number 3, 42.8%. Actually, not even 3 years, 2.25 years, really. The third worst in school history from a purely numbers perspective. But let me keep going. It's actually worse than it sounds. Tom Lieb is number 4, 43.6% winning percentage from 1940 to 45. And number 5 is Alfred Buser with a 46.7% winning percentage from 1917 to 1919. Now, I'm assuming that most of us watching or listening to this show went through U.S. history classes in high school or college or middle school or at some point in their lives. Take out Billy Napier. Think about those years again for those other 4 coaches. Again, that's 1917 to 19, 1940 to 45, 1936 to 39, and 1946 to 49. Think about that. Well, what was happening in our country and across the planet in those years? Chris, you want to tell us?
World War II.
And
a depression. And a Great Depression.
Teens? And the 19
World War One. World War One. World War One.
Yes,
Wow.
that's
so
right.
2 world wars and a depression.
That's right. A pair of world wars. World War I was from 1914 to 18. World War II was from 1939 to 1945. And who typically fought in those wars?
Young men that probably would have played football at the University of Florida.
Correct. Young men aged 18 through 22 were quite a large percentage of the combat zone demographic. So, of those 5 coaches with the worst winning percentages in the history of Gator football, which has been around since 1906, 4 of them were either coaching right in the midst or in the immediate aftermath of one of the 2 world wars. And the other one is Billy Napier.
I highly doubt any of those coaches had the number 12 talent composite in 247.
And that's the other thing I'm going to get at. None of those other 4 coaches had 0.1% of the resources that Billy Napier has at his disposal. Raymond Wolf, for example, did not have an army of 110 assistants to count the grains of sugar that were placed into his coffee cup, and another one to get to the airport 4 hours early to make sure that no striped panthers wandered onto the runway of Gainesville Airport so his private jet could safely take off on recruiting trips. The amount of support that is in place for Billy Napier to do even a competent job right now, forget about being the next Nick Saban or a competitor to Kirby Smart. The amount of support that is in place for Napier to do an even adequate job right now is unprecedented, not just compared to his predecessors in Florida, but around college football as a whole today, in the 2020s, in the world of the transfer portal, in the world of name, image, and likeness. The support he has is unprecedented compared to all the other teams he is currently fighting for recruits against. And here he stands with the third worst winning percentage in the 120 years of football at the University of Florida. And on the subject of winning percentages, by the way, one more point here, because there is still 5% of the fan base or so who says, well, this is really bad, but I still prefer Napier to Dan Mullen. It is highly disingenuous and it is downright offensive to compare Napier to Mullen. And like I said, very low percentage of the fan base, but it's also not zero. So to those people, I know Dan Mullen left Florida in a really bad spot. I know he quit. I'm the guy who spent months deep diving into the nasty cultural landmines he left behind in this program. I realize he left a horrendous culture and a bad situation roster wise. But for those of you who still claim, well, yeah, I know Napier is really bad, but I'd still rather him than Mullen. Wrap your heads around this. Billy Napier could win his next 23 games in a row, which would include a national title, and he would still have a worse winning percentage than Dan Mullen. He could win his next 23 games at Florida, and he would still have a worse winning percentage than Dan Mullen. Napier has more losses in 28 games in Florida than Dan Mullen had in 49 games. So no, we absolutely do not prefer Napier to Dan Mullen. Like I said, Mullen had to be fired. He quit on the program. Sure, left us in a really bad spot. But please, for the love of all things intellectually honest, please do not talk about comparing or preferring Napier to Mullen. That conversation's got to stop right now.
And if you rated the coaches in order since Urban Meyer left, Dan Mullen far and away is the best hire, the best performance on the field. There's no doubt about it. All the data shows that. Then I would probably say Will Muschamp, and the only reason I would say Will Muschamp because I think he was a very good recruiter. The offense was clearly his strong point, and he didn't embarrass the program. That's why I have Jim McElwain below him. I know Jim McElwain is the better
True.
winning percentage, went to 2 SEC championship
True.
games, but that was also in a time when the East was very down. I mean, Georgia was not as good, Tennessee was not as good. It was a lot easier to win the East back then, and he got steamrolled in both SEC title games that he went to. So, it's a little bit of a mirage, shall we say. So, and Jim McElwain embarrassed the program. And Will Muschamp at least understood and grew up a Gator fan. So I don't know. I think he understood what it meant to wear that logo just a little bit more. So it's far and away Dan Mullen is the best. Then McElwain, Muschamp, or yeah, pretty close. Muschamp being 2, McElwain being 3, and then Napier at the floor. I mean, it's not even close of what it was. And just because, listen, it was the right decision to fire Dan Mullen. I will stand by that. But you have to make the right hire. And this really goes to the fact of like people talk about all the time. Well, I hate having to rehire and fire coaches every 3 to 4 years. I mean, have you guys watched soccer before? I mean, they fire coaches sometimes by the season. I mean, and I'm not advocating we do that here, but you are always a few years away at a program like the University of Florida from winning a national championship. The resources, the fact where we are located geographically in these fertile recruiting grounds, the fact that our state is very pro NIL, we have a school with a rich history, rich tradition, a deep alumni base of support. Florida is always a few years away from a national championship. And if you hire the right guy, and there are going to be pieces on this roster, Neil, I feel that are very talented, that if we were able to keep them here, like a DJ Lagway, like a Trey Wilson, like an LJ McCray, and I'm sure there's a couple of others in there, you keep them on this roster as your foundation for the next head coach that comes in, you could conceivably win rather quickly at the University of Florida. It's not that far-fetched, but you have to make the right hire. You have to have the right people making the right hire, and they have to all be in alignment of what the organization needs to be successful. And until we have all of those pieces in place, we will not be successful. But you can win here rather quickly. Steve Spurrier came in one of the worst eras in Florida football in the late 1980s after we were put on probation. He won an SEC title in his first season, technically. They voted against giving Florida the trophy. He then won an SEC title officially in his second year, and then a few years later down the line, played for a national title, won a national title the following year. Urban Meyer won a national title in his second season at Florida with a quarterback who started as a true freshman. Sound a little bit familiar? I mean, it can be done. It absolutely can be done, but you got to find the right guy. And well, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about on this show in the coming months and weeks. If when this decision is made, we will have a hot board. Neil and I are going to put together a hot board of our wish list, and we're going to have a show and a discussion about that when the time comes. But Florida made the right decision 3 years ago to fire Dan Mullen. They just didn't hire the right guy.
Two-pronged decision, multi-stepped. You made the right first move, you missed on the second one.
Badly,
Yeah,
badly missed.
historically badly. Historically badly. And like we said, it's not personal to Napier. I mean, I don't even know Scott Strickland as a human being. I don't know if he's a good or bad person there. All I'm talking about is just his record of hires. I think very, very poorly of his decision to not fire Cam Newbauer when the allegations of abuse first came to his desk. But for all I know, maybe he truly thought that the guy could repent and just change his ways and be better because of it. Maybe he truly had good thoughts in his head and his heart, and it didn't work out. This is just a matter of this is a standard of Florida, and this is what you're doing. The two are not congruent, and there needs to be buy-in from the top all the way down for that to change.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Neil. Let's one more segment here, and then we'll get into our grades and final verdict for the A&M game. I know we kind of strayed away from the A&M game, but I think this is what the fans
What's to
really need to
talk
be.
about?
What is to talk about? These are going to be some pretty poor grades. I think we'll probably F them out pretty much, maybe other than special teams, which continues to show up. Special teams,
Yeah, good
if
for
they solved
them.
anything this offseason, it was special teams. But
Right.
9 games left in the season, Neil. And obviously, Napier at best may coach one or two more of those games. But where does the team go from here? Because you're going to be coaching the rest of the season, most likely with an interim staff, a lame duck staff that'll all be relieved of their duties in the coming months. What can the team really realistically even do? I mean, we're 1-2 right now. We're a slight favorite on the road against Mississippi State. I mean, that's going to be a tough game, honestly, even though Mississippi State got absolutely boat raced by a MAC team. But still, Florida finds ways to make their quarterbacks that they play look like Joe Montana all of a sudden. So, and then you come home and you play a UCF team that's actually riding hype right now. They're undefeated and power ranked much higher than Florida is in any power ranking you see across the country, including Dustin's and all kinds of weather forecaster. So it is going to get really difficult here very soon. And I don't know what people saw this weekend when Tennessee put 65 points in the first half against Kent State, but Florida is going to Knoxville in a few weeks, and that could be a bloodbath, like just straight up. So, I mean, what can we honestly do in the last 9 games?
Well, Florida's going to lose to Central Florida, and it's going to be brutal. And just prepare yourselves ahead of time for that. I've been the negative guy for prognosticating some terrible results so far this year. So sure, why not just continue that? That's going to be brutal. Just get yourselves ready for it. I think realistically speaking, Florida can maybe get to 5 wins if you beat Mississippi State, you beat FSU, you beat Kentucky, who looks very up and down. They looked awful against South Carolina before looking pretty good for the most part against Georgia. But that one, you know what? I can't even say that. I was gonna say it's in the swamp. That doesn't even matter anymore. We don't defend our home turf. That's not gonna make a damn bit of difference. But all right, so those two would put you at 3. Kentucky is at least a possible win. And then you got to say, all right, Florida can maybe steal one more. You're talking about Mississippi State, FSU, and if you get Kentucky, now you're at four. You could maybe steal any one. Doesn't matter which one, just pick one. You'll get one more, an upset. I don't see the Gators getting to a bowl game, which ordinarily you talk about in the sense of, well, you got to get to a bowl game because you want those 15 extra practices, but that doesn't matter at all because the staff isn't going to be here. So who cares? Because there's not going to be any continuity with any kind of system, right? So that doesn't even matter. At this point, what I'm looking for is I want to see guys play for the logo, which is something that we've talked about a lot in the past couple of weeks. But this is really where you find out where the what the guys are made of. Like you find out, for example, on the line, the right side has just been awful. I mean, it has just been an absolute train wreck on that right side of the offensive line. Do they just fold up shop or do they say, you know what? I want to give myself a puncher's chance at the NFL as opposed to the 0% chance from any game tape you have amassed so far to this point. I want to at least put myself in the running for a tryout, for a training camp one day. Forget the draft. That's, again, from what we've seen, not in the cards. But let's keep fighting and maybe get myself some positive momentum for my own personal future down the road. And similarly, let's enjoy what little bit there is to enjoy with my teammates right now. Clearly, things are not very fun to be a Gator football player right now, but there are still guys who are friends in that locker room. I talked to a couple of them today. They said, this sucks. But not everyone on this team is good friends with each other, which is honestly kind of the reality in college football. Like the myth is everyone's best friends with each other. We're all brothers. Well, no, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, there are some receivers and offensive linemen who don't know each other, who, I mean, know each other's name, but beyond that, not really any connection there. But they just go together to the practice field and then to the swamp, and then they just do their jobs together to try to win, work towards that common goal. But they're not really friends off the field. But there are guys who are friends on this team, and they're not going to get to suit up with each other in that locker room every day for the rest of their lives. In fact, in many cases, that's going to end after this year. As we all know, at this point, a new coach is going to come in next year. That's going to cause the transfer portal door to open. These guys, a lot of them are going to leave. And those friendships are never going to continue side by side in those locker rooms anymore. So let's see if the guys really care about that kind of stuff, both in terms of the personal goals for the future, in terms of getting themselves some NFL tape, and then in terms of the teamwork and love of playing for that logo that we talked about. Let's see who that really means something to. And let's see who takes this audition for their job next year, those who want to stay. Let's see who takes that seriously. For example, I would wager that DJ Lagway will take it very seriously. He doesn't know where he's going to go next year. He very well could leave, but he also could come back. He's talked about how much he loves being a Gator and he loves Gainesville. So maybe, but I'm assuming he will. Miles Graham, I'm assuming, is going to get some more playing time if the linebacker room keeps looking like that. I'm assuming he's going to see some more playing time. Let's see how he makes the most of his opportunities. And then for all those freshmen turned sophomores I talked about, yeah, I'm feeling good about those guys like Kelby Collins and TJ Searcy, Jakeem Jackson in the secondary, Sharif Denson, Jordan Castell. Yeah, they took their lumps as freshmen, but they're coming back for sophomores. Let's see them take that leap. Well, let's see it. We haven't in the first three games, but now's your chance, guys. If you want to compete for a starting job next year, if you want to be here, let's see you do that. Let's see you put out some game tape to bolster your opportunities to play for the Gators next year. That's what I'm looking for, Chris. Tennessee is going to put some X-rated number on us. It's going to be really ugly. Georgia, probably the same thing. Texas, probably the same thing. LSU and Ole Miss will probably smack us around for four full quarters. But I'm looking to see who wants to be here and who wants to be a part of the future here.
Yeah, no, I like that. And, something you kind of talked about when you mentioned certain players' names and obviously some high recruits. No player currently on our roster is worth keeping a head coach for. None. Not even DJ Lagway. I hope DJ Lagway stays. I want him to be a Gator. I want him to be the foundation. I think it's kind of what you're talking about, the foundation of the next coaching regime here. But at the end of the day, we've got to get our house in order. And if it means, I think we described Billy Napier's rebuild of Florida as a gut in Reno. This is a full-on demolition. This will be a demolition. And if people want to remain and be a part of building the foundation after the demolition has ensued, then we love that. We love that you really love the logo. We love that you love being a Gator. That is quickly falling away in this world of NIL, college football transfer portal now. But this is going to be a demolition and a rebuild. And obviously, it'll go a lot faster if we're able to retain some of those big pieces, like you mentioned, like a DJ Lagway, an Ada Mizell, a Tank Hawkins, a Trey Wilson, a Trayon Webb, you know, some guys maybe on that offensive line who are worth keeping around, like a Roderick Kearney, who was highly rated when they came out of high school, hasn't played as much yet, still developing into that the SEC offensive lineman. Jason Zandamela, who was a top 100 recruit, who came here and transferred in, still being developed. So we'll see if guys hang around. I think that's the biggest thing is, you're right. Who is going to play for pride of that logo? Who's going to be the guy when there's an interception and runs and guy down, doesn't give up and makes the tackle 50 yards downfield? Who's the guy when he busts a run down the sideline? Who's the guy chasing with him, making a block downfield? And we're gonna find out in the next couple of weeks who really cares about being a Florida Gator. And I guess it's better to make the move now because what will happen is if Napier continues to coach this team, the team is just going to continue to quit on the coach. I don't foresee it. It looked really bad on Saturday. It was the signs of a team getting ready to quit on a coach. We'll see how they play this weekend in Starkville. I think we'll know for sure. But I want to see when the move is made this season, how they then react to it and react to that adversity going forward. But we got to wait for this shoe to drop. We'll be here reporting on it. We'll be here. We'll do a show whenever it does happen. So make sure you're subscribed, listening along, following along. But I agree, Neil. We're going to find out who wants to be the foundation for that next regime, for that next chapter of Gator football. We'll find out in the next couple of weeks here.
And the wins and losses are honestly kind of secondary,
Yep.
with the exception of FSU. You always want to beat them.
And I mean, look, I
They
want to
look
be
really
UC. I
bad.
want to be UCF too. I mean,
Not
I
gonna happen.
know, I know you don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, that's a game where, good Lord, we got to get up and try to our best to win that game. And they're certainly less talented than A&M and Miami, so that's a team you look at on the schedule. You gotta put your best foot forward and see if you can get a win there. But I
Just
don't know. I
prepare
agree.
yourselves. It's not gonna
Yeah,
happen.
no, look, I'm mentally prepared for it too, Neil. I am. I mean, I'm not going to put any faith or trust in the staff until they show otherwise. So we'll have to see what happens over the next couple of weeks. But all right, let's go ahead and cap this show off with our grades and final verdict. I don't really think we need to go long on this one because I think all the grades are going to be pretty darn uh, similar. All right, let's hear it.
Offense F, defense F, special teams C plus. I'll give them a B minus. Um, Coaching 0. That's it.
Fans,
Fans get an A plus. I mean, they were great. They stayed throughout the rain delay. Um, Maybe I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of a staying crowd through the rain delay,
yeah,
but the overwhelming
can't blame
majority
them.
of them did. So I'll give them an A plus. Screw it, because you know what they deserve. We deserve better.
I agree. Well, I will pretty much have all the same grades as you, except special teams. Offense F, defense F, special teams I'll give a B plus. Think they continue to do well. I mean, they're doing a good job of not making mistakes like they did last year. So I'm going to continue to give them credit.
Sure.
Coaching 0, that F as we used to call it. Fans A plus, like we mentioned. You had a crowd of nearly 90,000 people stay behind and in the rain for the most part and watch what was a disaster on the field. So kudos to everybody there. Keep coming, keep showing up. It just goes to show that we love our Gators, and you just need to continue to apply pressure to the right people to make the right decisions in a
I love how
respectful
we
way,
didn't
of course.
even. I love how we didn't even analyze. Like we just
There's
go
no
F,
need. I mean,
F. Yeah, right. We did because we have for
if
2.25
you
years.
were coming for analyzing, this was not the show for you today. I think people really just want to hear about the coaching
Yeah,
situation and the coaching search that's about to take place. And maybe that, coaching searches are somewhat fun. This will be the first time of us together here on this show, Neil, for a coaching
yeah.
search. So that'll be interesting. That'll be fun to go through. And
Sure.
I'm really hoping that one day, I mean, ever since I joined the show, it's only gotten worse. So maybe I should just leave the show and it'll get better.
Well,
But
no, 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 no. This is what I was saying. It's not you. It's Napier. Under Napier, the program has not plateaued. It has continued
oh,
to get worse. Every
so
time
no,
we think we hit rock bottom, the man takes a hammer and a nail and keeps digging through the rock to reach lower and lower trenches. This is what
yeah.
it is.
You're right. It's funny. We were, my wife and I, we were talking. She was trying to make up a correlation between uniforms and records. She's coming up, Dustin, just so she's coming up with her own model. So you better watch out here about how to
Ooh,
predict games based on what the team
ooh.
wears. No, but hey, you're gonna love this. Traditional is the way to go. Highest winning percentage in the Billy. She's only analyzed Napier. We got to go back. We got to analyze all the coaches, at least back to Spurrier.
We
But
lost to Georgia Southern in that combo, by the way.
but okay, well, we haven't gotten that far back, like I said. But in the Napier tenure, traditional is the way to go, even though we've lost the last two times we've won it. So I don't know. But I told her, if we maybe find something, maybe we'll try to patent it out and get the data out there, and it'll be our own model of predicting Gator games going forward. But it's all we got right now. We gotta have some fun with this. But all right, Neil. Well, I think that about does it. This was a tough loss for the Gators. It's a tough time to be a Florida Gator, but always know there are brighter days ahead. It's like you tweeted out, after a rainstorm, there's always a rainbow. So right now we're in the middle of a rainstorm. It doesn't seem like it's ever going to end, but eventually it will. And we'll have great Gator football to talk about here on this show. So make sure for when that day comes, you're subscribed, you like this show. Leave us a comment about your thoughts about Saturday and the coaching situation at the University of Florida. And if you're listening on audio formats, please rate and review the show. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps bring Gator Nation more great content. So, from all of us here at the All Kinds Weather Forecast, go Gators. Let's stick together.
All kinds of weather.